Rabbi Teller mentioned that we are in the holiday season. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur is coming up, and I always like to share with everybody an understanding of holidays from a Jewish perspective, because a lot of people misunderstand holidays, especially Jewish holidays. And we do not believe that a holiday is a commemoration of something that happened in the past. Jewish holidays are often mistakenly viewed as this is a commemoration, a celebration, an acknowledgement, a recognition of something that has happened in the past. A great example of that is Passover. People think, mistakenly, that we are sitting around celebrating an event that happened close to 3,000 some odd years ago. And that is not true. That is not what a Jewish holiday is. On the contrary, a Jewish holiday is an experience that we are supposed to go through right now. It's an experience that each and every one of us is supposed to go through, and it's supposed to change us. We're supposed to come out of that experience a different person than we were when we went in. Just like everything in life. Everything in life is an experience. And hopefully, as you go through life, constantly experiencing life, every experience should be changing you. For the better, of course. But it should be changing you. It should be enhancing your understanding of life. It should be providing you with a new perspective, a new outlook as to how to go through this experience called life. Until we become callous. We become hardened. And life stops affecting us until something major, traumatic, on the good and the bad, come along and shake us. But every day is a new experience. And that is the essence of a Jewish holiday. A Jewish holiday is an experience that you're supposed to go through at that moment. Just to point this out, and don't worry, we'll bring it all back to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, but to point this out, Passover. The paradigm of the mistake of people thinking that this is an event in the past that we're commemorating, Passover is the paradigm that tells us that's not the case. When we sit around our Passover tables and we read the Haggadah, we actually read the line in the Haggadah that says that every Jew is supposed to view themselves right now as if they're leaving Egypt. Not that we left 3,000 some odd years ago. Right now, we're leaving Egypt right now. Do you see, the event that happened in the past is just the hook that we hang on what the experience is that we're supposed to go through. That's all the experience is. We look at the event in the past and we say, how do I know what the experience that I'm supposed to go through is? I'm supposed to be going through an experience, not just another holiday of sitting around and eating and having a good time, which is what every Jewish holiday is. They tried to kill us, we survived, let's eat. It's not just that. It's an experience. So what's the experience I'm supposed to have? Oh, let's look at the event in the past. If we look at the event in the past, that will tell us what the experience is that we're supposed to be having as we go through the Jewish holiday right now. Well, we're about to experience an unbelievable series of Jewish holidays. And every one of those experiences should change you. So we should understand what's the experience that we should be going through. And the experience of Rosh Hashanah, they tell us, the rabbis and the Talmud tell us that what was the experience that happened, what was the event that happened in the past on Rosh Hashanah? Adam was created. Rosh Hashanah is the birth of Adam and Chava. That is what Rosh Hashanah is. It is the birth of humanity. It is the creation of the world. But the creation of the world in terms of humanity, not the creation of earth and the moon and all that stuff. That actually happened prior. Rosh Hashanah is when Adam and Chava, the birth of humanity, is. And that's why we say Happy New Year. Because it is a new beginning. We are all being reborn. That's another phrase they stole from us. Born again. You're born again. All of a sudden you think of Christians. No, they stole that from us. Every Rosh Hashanah, you should be born again. That's the experience that you're supposed to be going through. And that's the season. It's in the air. We can feel it. People feel it all around. You go around to every synagogue in the country, if not in the world. I can only speak about America. But you go to every synagogue in America, and all of a sudden the walls open up, and they have to fill the rooms, and they have to rent hotels, and they have to get off-site locations because people come out in droves. Rosh Hashanah is in the air. Rosh Hashanah is in the air. This idea of a new beginning, a new year. One of the most amazing things about a new beginning, about a new year, starting fresh, is that we all re-embrace this idea of, I want to live life to the fullest. This is going to be my year. This is going to be the year. Because if there's one thing that unites all of us, I'm sure I've shared this with you already, but it's good to hear it again and again and again. If there is one thing that unites all of us, is that every single one of us wants to live a great life. Every single one of us wants to be great and does not want to settle for mediocrity. But yet in that very same breath, every single one of us knows that when we look in the mirror, we know that we are not living up to that potential that we have. We are not living up to the greatness that we know that's inside of each and every one of us. And so that's why you see this common theme, both Jew and non-Jew alike. If there's one thing that is so prevalent, so common when it comes to New Year's, whether it's the Jewish New Year or the solar New Year come January 1st, there's one thing that is universal. What does everyone get around and do? They all come around and they start thinking about themselves and they start making New Year's resolutions. It's a new year. I'm going to make my resolutions. What this year's going to be. And they start making a list. And I remember the days when people used to get out a pen and paper, pencil and paper, and write down their list. It's a good thing. But when it came to New Year's resolutions, they make their list, and this is going to be the year. And I used to teach, that's how long I've been teaching, that's how old I am, but I used to teach the following. That you could go find that paper next January 1st, next Rosh Hashanah, go find that paper, take it out, and all you had to do was erase the year and just write the new year. It's the same list. And now when we do it in our phone, in our little notebook app, all we have to do is open the app, scroll down to the bottom, because it was the last one edited a year ago, and open it up and just delete the last number and put in the new number, and then, wow, it jumps up to the top, and now I get to look at it for a few days until it drops down slowly but surely. It's the same list over and over. Why? We all want to be great. And the key to greatness is one thing called change. Change. You know the Hebrew word for year? Shana. It is also the same word for change. Shinui. Shaneh. To change. Because that's what's supposed to happen every year. We're supposed to change. We're supposed to have that rebirth. We're supposed to start anew. And Judaism calls that Teshuva. Knowing and owning up to the fact that I did not live this past year the way that I wanted to. I did not live up to those expectations that I have for myself and that the Almighty has for me. I made mistakes. I fell short. And I want to change. And the key to change is this thing called Teshuva. And the Hebrew word Teshuva doesn't mean to change, because we already said sheni means to change. Teshuva means to return. Teshuva means to go back to that original creation, that original birth of Adam and Chava, that original formation of man and woman in perfection. Just potential. No flaw, no blemish. Teshuva means to go back to that unadulterated state that Adam and Chava were in before they messed up. We can all get back to that. We can all start anew on Rosh Hashanah, culminating with Yom Kippur. Because one of the great lessons that I've learned in life, that I was taught, is that we are not the sum total of all of our mistakes. We are not the sum total of everything we've done up until now. Everything we've done up until now is a part of us. It's a major part of who we are, but it is not the sum total. There is so much more to us. And if we could get back to a clean slate and start anew, how refreshing that would be. So tonight I want to share with you how to do tshuva. How to make the most of this concept called tshuva so that hopefully Rosh Hashanah will be powerful, Yom Kippur will even be more powerful, and you can start the year with a clean slate, ready to live a life of greatness, or at least strive for it. So tshuva is a really simple process. It's actually just 4 steps. There are 4 really simple steps. The first one is charata. The first one is just to have regret for something I did wrong. The second one is aziva. Stop doing it. That's that simple. As the prophet said, the first thing you have to do is stop. You can't become great if you're holding on to a dead rat, dragging it along with you. You got to let go. Number 3 is own up to it and acknowledge, confess. Yeah, we believe in confession. He stole that from us too. We just don't believe to go in a little box and talk to some guy on the other side who probably should be talking back. Probably a role reversal there should be. But we believe in confession. The only difference is don't confess to an old man who should be doing his own and tying up in a box. Talk to the Almighty. Talk to your Father in heaven. Own up and say, I did this. It was wrong. And the final one is an acceptance. I'm not going to do it again. Period. It's really simple. It's really simple. I wish I hadn't done it. I stopped doing it. I confessed. I'm not going to do it again. Done. Beautiful. We can all go home. I'd like to go through a little preamble to it. A little preparatory work that can be done that'll actually make it a little more powerful. Actually make it a little more enhancing. Because why is it that we do every year, year in and year out, open up that list and just change the number? Why is that? Why is it that if it's so simple to do tshuva, shouldn't that list be changing? And so Judaism actually says the following. Step number 1. These are the I don't know, what's a good word?
Prerequisite?
Not prerequisites, the early stage. Huh? The preparation beforehand. That's it. The preparation stages. There are 7 steps to the preparations. Before you go and do tshuva, there are 7 steps you should go through first. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. What are those 7 steps? And the first one is actually quite profound. Pick one act that you did. Do you see, when we go and look at people's lists, and maybe here are some exceptions, but if you look at the list of things that we do tshuva on, our New Year's resolutions, because that's usually what it is, it's usually these broad, sweeping strokes. I'm not going to get angry this year. This year I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to work out this year. It's all these broad strokes. And while it's true, Judaism actually says that you should be working on broad strokes, those are called character traits. We should be working on our character traits. We should be working on not getting angry. We should be working on arrogance. We should be working on compassion. These are broad strokes. That's not how you do tshuva, though. It doesn't work. The way to do tshuva, step number 1, is you have to pick one act, one instance. Think back and find one time. Oh yeah, I remember that time I yelled at my mother. Yeah. I remember that time I embarrassed my friends. I remember that time I was at that dinner party and I just ate just a little too many desserts. Right, a little too many, I mean 20. Pick one act. Do not pick a broad stroke. You have to actually pick one act. I did X. Picture it. Remember it. Think about the scenario in which you did it with. Where you did it. How you did it. When you did it. One act. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is realize it was wrong. The only way we will change, first and foremost, is we have to stop justifying. We have to stop rationalizing. If we don't think that what we did was wrong, then there is no reason we will stop. I had a child, my wife and I are blessed with 7, and one of our children, when they were very young, would throw these tantrums because they did something wrong. It's amazing. They did something wrong and they throw a tantrum. Talk about inner guilt just pouring out. And then he would lash out. And to get this child to actually just say that what they did was wrong was the most frustrating experience. Because you would sit down with her, and I have 6 girls, so it's always a her. I mean, I have a boy too, but I just don't waste my time. You sit down with her and you say, okay, let's just talk about what happened here, what transpired. You spoke in a way that is disrespectful to your mother. No, I didn't. No, you did. You yelled at her and said really nasty things. No, I didn't. Nuh-uh. Now, if we don't admit that what we did was wrong, there's no reason we're going to stop. We have to finally, once and for all, stop justifying, rationalizing, blaming. We constantly shift blame to everybody and anybody. I want to tell you a story, amazing story. Share 2 amazing stories the rabbis tell us from the Talmud. The first one is with Eliyahu HaNavi, Elijah the prophet. We can have a discussion another time about the concepts of what are these stories true, they're not true, a whole different discussion. But this particular story is with Eliyahu HaNavi. Elijah the prophet is said to just be traveling the world. And as he's traveling the world, he comes across, and there's all kinds of stories and vignettes of interactions that Eliyahu has with people. And one particular time, Elijah was walking along, and he came across a fisherman who was being quite frivolous with his time. Just wasting his time. And so Elijah was a little concerned. How could a grown man, how could someone just waste time, just throw away time like that? So he went over to the fisherman, he says, what do you don't have what to do productive with your time? Nah. Well, don't you have a Torah you could learn? Nah. Don't you have some mitzvahs you could be doing? Nah. Well, I don't understand. One day you're going to stand in front of the judge of judges. One day you're going to have to give an accounting of your life. What are you going to say to the Almighty who created you when He says, you wasted time? Why didn't you at least spend some time learning wisdom, learning some Torah? Why didn't you do that at least? And the fisherman says, I have an answer. I have an answer, don't worry. And Elijah's like perplexed. He says, please tell me the answer. Maybe I could use it. And so the fisherman says, Deya lo natatali, bina lo natatali. It's very simple. I'm going to tell the Almighty, you didn't make me smart enough. You didn't make me wise enough. And then Elijah says, wow, that's a good answer. Tell me, what do you do for a living? And the fisherman says, I'm a fisherman. And Elijah says, you're a fisherman? I've always wanted to fish, but I can never figure out fisherman's lore. How do you catch a fish? What, do you know how, can you tell me? I just want to be able to catch a fish. And the fisherman says, oh, sure, it's not, you're right, it's not so simple. You got to know how to put the bait on the hook just right. You got to put the bait on the hook just right so that when it goes in the water, it doesn't look dead, because the fish don't like dead worms, they like live worms. So you got to make it sit there just right so that it wiggles a little bit. You also got to know how to jimmy it, you got to shimmy it, you got to shake the rod a little bit so it's not just sitting there. And you got to know once the fish bites on, you got to know how to reel it in. You can't just reel it in really fast, yank it, the hook will just come right out of the mouth and rip it open. You got to know how to do it. And he goes through methodically, step by step by step, explaining in detail to Elijah how to fish. And the moment he finishes, Elijah says, let me ask you a question. Explain to me. You're going to tell the Almighty that He gave you the brains and understanding to know how to fish, but not the brains and understanding to know how to learn the Torah that He told you to learn. And as soon as Elijah said that to the fisherman heard it. And he started crying. And Elijah said, listen, let me comfort you. Don't worry. And Elijah said something so powerfully abrupt. And it's like a punch in the stomach. Elijah said the following: don't worry. Kol boy olam. Every living being, every single human comes up to the Almighty with that answer. Every single human being comes up to the Almighty with that answer. Every single one of us. When we're asked, why did we do X? Why didn't we do Y? Every single one of us is going to say, it's not my fault. It's not my fault that I yelled at my mother. It's not my fault that I embarrassed my friend. It's not my fault that I didn't live a life of greatness. You know, God, if you had only given me a different set of parents, if you had only given me a different job that made more money, if you had only given me a different spouse, if you only had given me different children, if you had made me stronger, taller, better looking, we'll come up with a plethora of excuses and reasons why we fell short. But not one of them will be, I was wrong. Like I remember when I was growing up, the Fonz, have you ever heard of the Fonz? There was a TV show called Happy Days. And in Happy Days was this short, dorky Jewish guy who played a really cool Italian guy. Henry Winkler. Apparently he's like popular now on some other show, and people know him as a short, dorky Jewish guy. And he played this really cool Italian guy. And he was the Fonz. He was the coolest guy you could ever meet. I actually saw an interview that Rocky, Sylvester Stallone, when he thought of how to play a cool character, he based it off the Fonz. And there was one episode where the Fonz made a mistake. And the entire show, the entire half-hour sitcom, was about him saying, I was wrong. Because the whole show, the whole half hour was him saying, I was wrong. He couldn't say it. He couldn't say it. The writers were so brilliant. That's every single one of us. Number one, pick one act and admit it, acknowledge it, realize it was wrong. It was a mistake. It was nobody's fault but mine. I did it. Number three is realize that there's going to be consequences for that mistake. You know, the first step in becoming a mature adult is to realize that life has consequence. That's the difference between a mature person and an immature person. It's not age. It's realizing that my choices matter. If I blow off school, that will lead to one series of events. If I take school seriously, that will lead to a different choice of events. If I quit my job because I got upset at the boss, well, now I'm unemployed. If I just keep the job and bear with it, then guess what? I have experience. Life has consequence. One of the great blocks in people changing in life is this justification that we have in our mind that it won't be so bad. Okay, so it was wrong, but it's not so bad. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? Realize that if God says it's bad, that's bad. Like there's really no ands, ifs, or buts. If the Torah says this is wrong, then that means there's going to be consequences if I do it. Period. Those consequences are real. If we don't see those consequences, there's no reason to change. A child that gets away with something, a parent that lets a child continuously make the same mistakes over and over and over, you know what psychologists call that? Psychologists, they have a label for that. It's called the enabler. You're actually telling the child that it's okay. No, I've told them it's wrong. But what did you do about it? What consequence was there? Well, I told them it was wrong. Oh, and a 4-year-old understands that. And a 10-year-old understands that. And a 15-year-old understands that. That's called the enabler. There's consequences. But it's more important than just consequences. It's much more powerful than just consequences. It's much more palpable than just consequences. It's that those consequences are not just real, but they are inevitable. I'll tell you another story. This one's a little juicier. This one's about an individual in the Talmud known as Reb Elazar ben Dudoy. Reb Elazar ben Dudoy. Reb is a title of prestige, rabbi. That does not mean prestige nowadays. But in times of the Talmud, it was prestige. I'm speaking about myself. No one else knows. Well, Reb Elazar ben Dudoy, this title of Rebbe Elazar ben Dudoy, Rebbe Elazar ben Dudoy was not a rabbi his whole life. As a matter of fact, he never was a rabbi. We call him rabbi. As a matter of fact, you know what his whole life was? His whole life was entrenched in lust, pornography, prostitution. He was so entrenched in prostitution. He was so absorbed by it, addicted by it, if you will, that there was not a prostitute in his city that he did not taste. Until one time he was given word that there was the creme de la creme of prostitutes that was over 7 rivers, world famous, and she took a bucket of gold as her pay. And so he saved up his money when he heard this. Oh, I have to have that. And he saved up his money until he got enough money in the bucket, and he had enough money for travel expenses, and he went. And when he got there, they told this woman that there's a man who's traveled 7 rivers to come see you. And she's like, really? Send him in. She didn't believe it. And he came in, and she said, did you really travel 7 rivers to get here? They don't have prostitutes where you're from. He's like, no, I have. So you traveled 7 rivers? He said, yeah. Salivating. And she says to him, Elazar, people can change. You'll never change. And as soon as he heard that, he was stunned. He left. He went to the top of a mountain. He went and he walked out into the countryside and he walked up to the top of a hilltop and he cried. And he cried and he cried until his soul departed. And when his soul left him, a heavenly voice came out from the sky and said, Reb Elazar ben Dudoy went right to Olam Haba, went right to heaven. Reb Elazar ben Dudoy went right to heaven. There are so many lessons in that story that I don't think time allows. Maybe at the end, if there's a question, if there's no questions, I'll go back and I'll elaborate more on that story. But the one thing I have to point out is, why did he leave? What changed? He knew he traveled 7 rivers. He traveled 7 rivers. He saved money. He gets there. She's like, you traveled 7 rivers? Yeah. And she's like, people change. You're never going to change. Why didn't he just say, you're right, now let's get on with it? Instead, what does he do? He's like, I got to leave. And he leaves and he tries rise until the Almighty takes his soul. And my rabbi, Rabbi Weinberg, says, what happened? What did he hear? And if you look carefully at the words she said is what we have to hear. The word she said was, people can change. You'll never change. And what did he hear at that moment? What he heard was the following. If you asked him, Elazar, is what you're doing good? What do you think he'd say? No. This person shouldn't live like this, so why do you do it? He's like, I can't, but one day I'm going to stop. Don't worry, one day. Don't worry, one day. Don't worry, one day. Next year. Next year. Next year. Next year. Just keep changing the year. Just keep changing the year. And you know what you realize? When you keep changing the year, it's never going to happen. That's what he realized right then and there. When she said, people change, you will never change, he realized she's right. If I don't do something right now, I'm never going to change. Because we always think we have time. We always think we've got time next year. We always think there's time. I'm going to change. I'm going to grow up. I know I'm 50, but I'm going to grow up. I know I'm 55. I'm going to grow up. I know I'm 60. I'm going to grow up. And then you just stop staying. You see, we have to realize there's not consequences that are going to happen. There are consequences that are inevitable if we don't change. And not only are those consequences inevitable that we don't change, those consequences are already here. They're already here. There's already consequences. There's already that feeling of self-loathing that we're not living up to our potential. There's already the consequences of fragile and broken and damaged relationships by mistakes we've made. The consequences are not going to be. The consequences are here. They're here because of the mistakes we continuously make. But here's the good news. The good news is number 4. Number 4 is Teshuva will stop it. Teshuva will save you. Teshuva will get rid of the consequences. That is the unbelievable gift that the Almighty created in the world. Get a little Kabbalistic here just for a second. Keep track of time, don't worry. When God created the world, the first thing God created was time. Time. And what was it that God created when he created time? He didn't just create a Big Ben. If anyone's from the East Coast, you would have gotten that. God didn't create a watch. God created a unit. When God creates something, there's a unit that's created. What's the unit that was created? A year. God created one whole year with all of its divisions and all of its nuances and all of its parts. And what happens every Rosh Hashanah is that year is recreated. And because of that, there's this tremendous metaphysical reality called Teshuva. There's a comedian that lives here in the community. He's a well-known comedian. He's actually his full-time gig is he is the opener for Jerry Seinfeld. And I remember hearing him say one time, he says that, and forgive me, this is a joke against women. Oh well, I might just dig my own grave, but it's funny. If you're married, you get it. But he says that when women get upset, they get historical. You mean hysterical, right? No, historical. Women never forget. They forgive, but they don't forget. You see, if we make mistakes and we say, that's it, I was wrong, I wish I hadn't done it. I'm never going to do it again. Okay. But it's still there. You know, remember when you were a kid and you broke something of your mother's china? Like, that's it. It's chipped for the rest of your life. Every family dinner, she's going to take out the teapot and say, oh, yeah, you remember when you chipped this? It's like, yes, I remember when I chipped it. I was 3, Mom. You're like, and then, God forbid, you smashed it for good. Then it's like, oh, I'd offer you cream, but we don't have a creamer. You remember when you did that? Yes, Mom, I remember. So even if we get rid of the mistake, it's still there. It's still a blemish. It's still a mark on our soul. And Judaism says, no, it's not. The proverbial, well, when we die, we're going to be shown the movie of our life. Our whole life is going to flash before us in an instant. And Judaism says that the greatest gift that God created in that reality is the editing room. For those of you who are in the industry, like, what do you make? Is there a product? Yeah, there's lots of products in development. Is it something I can hold? Oh, the industry. But, okay, my own little, how many people in the room did I just offend? Half the room, probably. And the other half is doing something else while they're thinking of doing that. So, the editing room. If you know anything about Hollywood, the editing room, you know the floor of the editing room is filled with all this great stuff that only goes to the DVD. I don't even know what DVDs are anymore. When I was growing up, the DVD. Now it just goes to YouTube. Right? The editing room, all the stuff that they cut that drops on the floor that doesn't make it into the movie, just goes to YouTube. You know what Teshuva does? Teshuva deletes it. Gone. Gone. If you do it properly. You do Teshuva properly, it's gone. It's as if you never did it. That's the power of Teshuva. Just because of time, I'm just going to quickly do the last 2 and then jump to the last one. The last 2, I don't think you need me to flush it out. You could do that on your own exercise, number 5 and number 6. Number 5 is do a cost-gain analysis. Number 6 is also a cost-gain analysis. Think back to that one act. Remember, one act, not a broad stroke. Not, I'm never going to get angry again. No, that time I yelled at my mom and insulted her. That time that I yelled at my friend and insulted them because I was angry. That one time, think specifically. Go back to that one act and do a cost-gain analysis. What did you gain by doing that? What was the benefit versus what was the cost? It's really simple. Because when you were doing it, it probably felt great until the moment you finished. So while you were doing it, what did you gain? That momentary sense of satisfaction, that sense of self-righteousness. Yeah, but what was the cost? The feeling of humiliation and self-loathing that came after. The rift in the relationship, the fragment that now exists between us. That's the cost. So number 6 is, okay, now do a cost-gain analysis in theory. What would it have cost you to overcome and resist the temptation versus what would you have gained? What was the cost of sleeping in and missing that meeting and getting yelled at when you got to work? Well, what would it have cost you to just get up when the alarm went off and get out of bed? Yeah, I would have been a little tired for about the first 40 minutes. Yep, you would have been groggy for about 40 minutes, but what would you have gained? A day of feeling satisfaction, of feeling self-empowered, a day of feeling a sense of accomplishment. Wow, that's a tremendous cost gain. I wonder, was it worth it? Which brings us to number 7. Because when we do a cost-gain analysis, it's only a fool that would go to the end of the cost-gain analysis and say, yeah, it was worth it. It was worth it. No. Which brings us to number 7. You know what number 7 is? So if it wasn't worth it, so then why'd you do it? Because it's just too damn hard. To change is hard. And you know what's hard about it? It's pain. It taking the pain of change is what's so hard. As opposed to just doing what I know. When in doubt, go with what's comfortable. When in doubt, just slip into habit. It's so much harder to break habit. It's so much harder to be cognitive and conscious of our decisions. That pain, that battle, is what the Mesilas Yesharim, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto says is the real war that we fight. It's a milchama. Medrash tells us that soldiers were coming back from a war victorious. And they were coming back from the war carrying their swords and looking beaten and howled, but also triumphant. And there was an elderly sage at the city gate. And the elderly sage says, "Welcome back from the battle. And welcome to the real war." The real war is not just when there's an enemy in front of you with a spear or a sword or even a gun. The real war is when you're standing face to face with your own demons. The real war is every day making decisions to fight the urge to just give in to habit. That's the real war. And that takes pain. Go through these 7 steps. You go through these 7 steps, you get to the end and you go, okay, so just do it. Yeah, it's going to be painful. Yes, it's going to be hard. But it's worth it. Cost-gain analysis. Now you can understand why those 4 steps of Teshuva, while they are so simple in terms of just 4 steps, they're quite profound if you do the 7 preparatory stages. You pick that one act and you look at it and you go, this was disgusting. God forbid you ever sent a picture through texting with an S instead of a T. How would you feel if that picture popped up on your Facebook page? Be humiliated. It's amazing. Ask any parent, except for newborn parents. Ask any parent that has a toddler or older. Did you ever yell at your kid and get a little carried away? Yeah, we all have. You ever do it when someone was watching you? Yeah, for about a millisecond. Until you go, ooh, that just must look so bad. We're disgusted. If we see a parent doing that, we go, oh, come on. Control yourself. And we're not talking to the kid. Imagine if all those mistakes, you make a list. Before this year, before Rosh Hashanah, you got a week. Before Rosh Hashanah, make a list of 10 acts, 10 individual instances where you know you made a mistake. And now, imagine the following. Imagine that there was a camera there and someone caught it with their cell phone and put it on your Facebook or your Instagram. Sorry, I dated myself. And put it out there for everyone to see. How would you feel? Disgusted. Well, it's out there. It's out there. And you're going to see it one day. Oh, don't you wish it was gone? That's charata. That's what regret is. I wish it was gone. Get rid of it. Go through this process. It's gone. Next, I'm not going to do it. I got stop doing it. If it's a continuous thing, so just stop doing it right now for today. I'm done. Stand in front of the Almighty, say, God, I made a mistake. I did this. I wish I hadn't done it. And I'm never going to do it again. You go through those 4 steps earnestly, sincerely, honestly, then on Yom Kippur, it's deleted. Gone. I hope every single one of you makes a list of 10, if not 20, if not 30. If it's me, it'd probably be about 100. Make a list. I hope every single one of you makes that list, does the process, and gets it deleted on Yom Kippur. So that all of us, every single one of us in this room can be written in the book of life and have it sealed on Yom Kippur. Thank you so much.
Anybody have any questions?
Good question.
Yes. There's this line about Teshuva where it's like where the repentance stands, nobody can, or something along that.
Yes. So he's asking, there's a line in the Talmud that says, wherever a Baal Teshuva, wherever someone who really does Teshuva stands, even the most righteous tzaddik can't stand in that place. So there's two levels of Teshuva. I'm only speaking tonight about the first level, because the second level is a level that is incredibly hard to ever get to. It's called, there's Teshuva, and then there's what's called Teshuva Gemora. Complete Teshuva. Because not only is there the initial gift that I told you, and it's a miracle, it's metaphysical, why this should happen. It's not logical that this is true, what I'm telling you. You can't logically explain this. That the act should be deleted. So the first type of tshuva is the act is deleted. But because we're dealing with the Almighty doesn't forget anything. It's never deleted entirely. It's somewhere else. It's not on your record. It's not on your scale. When you're judged, it's not on your scale, but it's somewhere in the data bank of the Almighty. And if you get to that second level of tshuva, then that very act that you did is brought back, put back into your life story, into your movie. But this time, when it's put in, it's as a merit. It's as a reward. It's as a bonus on the other side of the scale. It's because that act that you did propelled you to such a location that you're in a different stratosphere. The example, and again, I don't suggest doing this. The example is, God forbid you have a husband and wife where one of them is unfaithful. One of them goes and breaks the trust of the marriage. But as a result of the break of trust in the marriage, that becomes the catalyst, if you will, for them to get a stronger, better marriage. Then that impropriety actually was what the marriage needed. And therefore that impropriety became a merit. I do not recommend trying that. Because it only works, A, if you didn't intend to do it for that reason. Because if you hear this class, you go, wait, Teshuva erases it, so let me just go out and, live it up for a couple days, and then go, hey, Teshuva! So it doesn't work. The Rambam tells us it doesn't work. So you can't do that. That's number one. Number two, in order to get to that level tshuva, the Talmud and Rambam tells us that in order to get to that level tshuva, the only way that you can get to that level tshuva is if you are in the exact same circumstances that you were when you transgressed, the exact same circumstances a second time, and you don't transgress. And that's almost impossible. So it's very difficult. That in order to get to that higher level tshuva, called Teshuva Gemora, everything has to be exact. The circumstances have to be exact. Just because I'm a man, I'm going to use a male example. The guy is foolishly in a hotel room in a foreign city where he's away from his wife, and there's no one else on the hotel floor, so no one could possibly see her come into the room or leave the room. He disabled the cameras, so there's no way anyone could possibly see what's going on, and she is making extreme overt passes at him. And he gives in. I don't know any human male that would not in that instance, except myself, of course, if anyone's going to speak to my wife. No. The only way that you could get Teshuva Gemora is if he was in the exact same situation. He was in a hotel room, in a floor, there's no one else on the floor, the cameras are out, she's in the room, she's making passes at him, and in that instance, he's got the ability to say, no, not this time, and walk out. That's hard. It's not just hard to be able to walk out, but it's hard to create that scenario where it's exactly the same. So Teshuva Gemora is very difficult. Yeah.
Thank you for the decision. I was wondering if that's why in the story God says, Hashem says, ribbit Elatar.
So you brought me back to the story. I'll tell the story, I'll tell the lesson of the story, and then we're done. Because I can see it's late, people need to leave. So the reason he's called Rebbe in the story is not, he didn't get to that high level. He did not. Because we don't know if he was ever in that situation as well or not. But the reason he's called Rebbe is because he taught us lessons with his story. Rebbe means teacher. He taught us lessons with his story. And therefore we call him Rebbe.
Wait, Rabbi.
No, yeah.
Because you had said, though, that, just a little clarification, you were saying that you have to confess to God. But what if you do something wrong to another human being?
Okay,
so I didn't know if there was a distinction there.
There's definitely a distinction. So I can't cover everything, but okay. But that's a good clarification. Keep in mind, everything that I said has to do with doing tshuva and making amends with yourself in front of the Almighty. However, there is a caveat. If anything of these mistakes that you need to do tshuva for involved another human being, then you first have to apologize to that human being before you can get tshuva from the Almighty. That's a prerequisite. It's a barrier. You can't ask God for forgiveness before you ask the person that you wronged. Okay?
Just to make sure about the line.
Huh? What's that?
I wasn't exactly sure what
Quickly,
the seven was. What's
Number
the seven?
one.
Yeah.
Number one, pick one act. Pick one act. Number two, acknowledge that it was wrong. It was a transgression. Number three, there's going to be consequences. But those consequences are not just going to be consequences. Those consequences are inevitable and they're actual. They're here. Okay? Number four is tshuva can get rid of it. 5 and 6 is the cost-gain analysis. 5 is cost-gain of the transgression. 6 is what would have been the cost-gain of doing the right thing. And number 7 is realize that growth is through pain. Okay? Thank you so much.